Hello, friends. Andrea with the Bangs here, and there's been a disturbance in the Twitterverse. So, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with what's going on, there's been some talk by our friend Mr. Bret Weinstein, member of the IDW, speaking about Jesus. Speaking about good old Jesus and what he means to Christians. And so I actually spoke a few days ago with Paul Vander Klay, and we discuss the meaning crisis. And we look at Christianity as an answer to the meaning crisis. It's not your average, let's just look in the Bible and you've got your easy peasy answer. No. We go into it, we look at the history of the search for meaning, we look at why it isn't as easy as it seems, even if you do have an answer and follow and have faith and whatnot. And I go through some of my own doubts, and it was just a really good talk. We speak about the things that Bret brings up. So it's long, guys. So I just hope that, okay, you can't watch all of it. At least watch however much you can and then go to the last 10 minutes because the sum up is pretty good. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking so you can get to the episode and let us know what you think as usual. And if you are new and you think what I'm doing is worthwhile, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Hello, Paul.
Should I call you Andrea?
Yeah, just call me
Or
Andrea.
Miss
Okay.
Bangs?
Yeah, well, okay. I know, because it's not true right now. I put them back. Okay. I've been asked, well, some people said that they don't believe I have a forehead.
So is it Andrea or Andrea?
Okay, so I've done actually this before as well. It's Andrea.
Andrea. Okay,
Andrea. So Andrea sounds very exotic and lovely, but that's just not my name.
Andrea. All right.
So Andrea. So you can call me Andrea. And like my friends call me And as well. Ben calls me Ampersand. It's up to you. It's up to you. You can just call me Andrea or And. I don't know. People think And is weird, but it's just like my nickname. But you go by Paul, correct?
I go by Paul.
It's just very straightforward.
Very simple.
I know. I just have all these like cutesy little like, well, I mean, you can call me this or just call me Andrea. But Miss Bangs is more for like Bangs is my Twitter persona. People like it. So I'm like, okay. But
okay.
We'll see if I get heretical status from this. So, okay. So the reason why I wanted to talk with you is because there's been a lot. I mean, it actually just, I thought of talking with you for a while and I usually wait for an angle to come up. But there's been a lot of religious talk on Twitter, thanks to Bret Weinstein, as most of the viewers know, talking about Jesus. So,
oh Jesus, just
guy.
Can't keep him down.
Oh, but who do you say that he is, Paul?
Well, that's what I'm preaching about tomorrow.
So here's the thing. You did a whole video and I started watching. I actually watched like about 20 minutes of it before because I only had so much time to prepare because we only just figured this out yesterday. So okay.
And I do very long videos.
Yeah, you do. I just need more
time
to prep next time, Paul. Okay, so here's the thing. I have been doing a series about, I've been touching on meaning, but I've really been looking at things about the IDW. But I kind of feel like the IDW is not answer. It's an answer to symptoms of the meaning crisis. Does that make sense? And so I want to know, so there are a few things I want to kind of go with you. I do want to get to the sort of religion-y Bret Weinstein talk, not just him, but the subject that's been brought up on Twitter that people have been discussing. But I do want to talk about what do you think is going on in terms of the IDW answering the meaning crisis, if that makes sense. And how is it answering that? Do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, I have thoughts on everything, and if you
Okay.
watch my channel, you'll learn that.
Okay. I've just
I
begun.
I
Okay.
don't I so the IDW is something that was coined by Bret's brother Eric,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in some ways the IDW is more political than
Okay.
religious.
I thought it was more cultural, like cultural
Well, I think
context.
especially for the kind of attention, let's say Andrew Yang is getting from Eric and Brett
Oh,
and Dave
okay.
Rubin. I see, I in my how to categorize the IDW, I think for the most part, they are in many ways like myself, people who had traditionally been voted Democratic,
Mm-hmm.
probably more to the left politically,
Okay.
for whom um, there's been a degree of alienation by the rise of woke culture,
Yes.
and
Okay.
that's very much seen. I the way I relate politics and religion is that politics is now and religion is always, and so they are connected. But I think politics is almost always downstream from religion and culture, and always much more narrowly focused and more particular. So I, Eric coins this phrase, and it sort of takes on some resonance sufficient to that the New York Times publishes a piece about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I listen to its various members and where I see they've gotten their traction,
Okay.
Ben Shapiro,
Yeah.
although Ben is he's I mean, it's a fairly diverse bunch. So Ben is over obviously on the right,
Yeah.
a right wing pundit. Jordan Peterson, who's Canadian, so he's kind of out of the ballpark, but appeared
Mm.
regularly on Fox News for a while. But if you look at Sam Harris, Eric and Bret Weinstein, all of them, in a sense, they are refugees from the left who sort of like Dave Rubin feel on the political outs and are looking to create a new path. I don't see now Jordan Peterson very much is front and center in the meaning crisis because the
Mm-hmm.
heart of Peterson's message wasn't primarily political, although he plays plenty on that strain and gets pulled over there by Rubin and the Weinsteins and goes there himself often.
Mm-hmm.
I think the heart of Peterson's work has been he's attempting to help individuals basically get out of nihilistic depression
Yeah.
and being stuck.
Yeah.
And so but it was really John Vervaeke when I started listening to his awakening from the meaning crisis that meaning crisis term really started to bring things better into focus in terms of the culture.
Okay.
And the truth is, we've been in a meaning crisis for a long time. It sort of ebbs and flows. If you look at the Inklings, for example, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Owen Barfield, and then Charles Williams and a number of others who aren't as famous, they also were addressing the meaning crisis post World War I into the Second World War. And
Okay.
so these issues have been around in the culture for a very long time.
Well, I mean, we look at Nietzsche or Nietzsche, I believe it's
Okay,
pronounced.
I get scolded. I get scolded on that in the comment section of my
Okay.
channel. Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. So, I mean, he was in a way I mean, prophetic in understanding there was a crisis before the public realized it, it seems. And I actually spoke with someone, Stephen Klaus. He's a dude going for his philosophy PhD. He's doing his dissertation right now. He's been off of Twitter. I really want to interview him again, but he's writing his dissertation and has said he's got to do that before he does more interviews. But he and I spoke about. He's very interested in Nietzsche and what that perspective is, and he's a specialist in Aristotle, along with founding fathers' understanding of
Hmm,
Aristotle. and
interesting.
and yeah, it's a very interesting overlap there. But he also was, we were talking about, we actually, like, I wanted to talk about like this, like what we're talking about, and like, well, what's the answer? if God is dead and you've killed him and replaced him with nothing, what's the answer? But we accidentally just ended up talking about virtue and what is a citizen and what does it mean to be a citizen now versus then back in the ancients versus the, whatever. So anyway, so we were talking about how, I guess, kind of how did we get here? So we did almost like a preliminary, like let's kind of lay the groundwork. What was it? How did they find meaning then? What did it look like to serve? You had your own gods in your own city. You didn't have to really worry. You warred a little bit with the others who didn't have your god, but you were only concerned with your little polity and serving Athena or serving Ares or serving Poseidon or serving whoever. And so it was doable in the sort of city-state way that they had it back then. And then we ended it with me being like, okay, but we didn't cover what to do now. Because we talked a little bit about Christianity as well and how that was sort of an answer to, not sort of, like that was an answer to like meaning crisis in the first century Palestine. In a way, because he talks about, because this is stuff I learned from my degree. I have a Christian studies degree with a minor in history. And
okay.
This is exactly what I remember learning in history, Christian history 101, about the Hellenization of Judaism, which is Christianity basically. And that's why we talked about Ben Shapiro's Judeo-Christian thing about the what was it, the burning of Notre Dame. And so we talked a little, because he wrote a response to that, and I actually made a little video response to that. So we talked about that. So we got in some important things, but I didn't get to the meat of like, well, what do we do now? How should we then live? So anywho, that's where I want to start here. I do want to start with him eventually when he's done his dissertation, but I want to talk about that here. So Bret was saying in that little piece you showed from his discussion with Alistair McGrath. Alistair basically, so you're suggesting a new religion then? And that kind of, like, it's an answer to Nietzsche. Like, that's what it is. Is it? Isn't it? Am I reading it properly?
You should have John Vervaeke on your channel. He'll probably say yes.
Okay.
And
I would love to have him. I need to
what's that?
I need to get to know him a bit and be like, hey, I'm not a random asking. I need to be like, hey, you know me a little bit from comments on Twitter.
He's very open and willing to speak, and he's been doing a lot of interviews, and what you are asking is exactly what he is trying to address.
Okay.
So he would be a good guest.
Okay.
Now there's sort of three of us. Maybe you should have Jonathan Peugeot on too.
Okay.
Maybe
I should have all of you on at the same time.
All of us on, or Sevilla King, her too. Okay. I don't know if you know her channel, Quality Experience. She's out there too.
I'll have to
and some of the other people, Mary Cohen, and I mean, there's a whole bunch of us talking about this.
Okay.
Now, so I think John Vervaeke does a good job laying out the philosophical history and the roots of this.
Okay.
I see things differently in some places, partly because of my religious commitments, but he and I are very conversant on this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the easy ways to get into it. This is a little book by Charles Taylor. He generally writes really fat books like Sources of the Self.
Oh gosh, that's big. Yeah.
Or A Secular Age, huge books. Charles Taylor made the observation that part of what happens in modernity is that we are no longer born into an external storied structure. Now I'm adding my own take to this, which I usually do when I quote these people. So purists will come to me and say, no, that's not exactly what they said. And, okay, so I fudge all this stuff.
Okay.
But we are born into a storied structure that connects heaven and earth. Okay. And we derive our place in the universe from that structure.
And these are our ancestors, or this is how we traditionally came into the world?
That's how almost all traditional societies work.
Okay.
There is a story within which everyone lives. Now, this gets at my thesis that you and I, although in this materialist age, we tend to fixate sort of on our bodies, that I am this body, and that's very true. But we are
Mm.
really weird bodies because we are storied creatures. And illustration I like to use of this is visiting my grandmother once when I was in college, or probably seminary at that point, and she was in her late 80s by this point, and I'm in my early 20s, and she looks at me and she says, "You know, when I think about myself, I think about myself as being in my 20s. And when I look in the mirror here, my body is, in my late 80s.
Yeah.
And this is a strange thing. And it's
Yes.
strange because our bodies age, our bodies change. We were children and we grew and
Hmm.
all of these things, and then we grow old. But we don't feel that way. Well, what is the we that we're thinking about? And really, in a sense, and you'll get this in Benjamin Boyce's conversation with John Vervaeke, that
Okay.
we are, in a sense, this autobiography, and that's the me I think about. And I first thought of this a number of years ago when I was really wrestling with, what does it mean that we have the promise of the resurrection?
Hmm.
Because there's all these questions that revolve around it. Well, and it's phrased by Christians in lots of different ways. Well, when I get to heaven, how old will I look? Is it going to be me in my 20s? Is it going to be in me in my 50s? My grandmother had some very strange ideas that with our new bodies will be unrecognizable, partly because Jesus was seen to be hard to recognize. So after my grandfather died, she felt quite sad because she imagined she wouldn't recognize him when she got to heaven. And I thought, Grandma, that's pretty sad.
But they also did recognize him when he decided to unveil.
Exactly. So anyway, but that just it just emphasizes the fact that we are very strange creatures,
Mm.
because this duality between heaven and earth is built right inside of us,
Okay,
and we
wait.
feel that.
Can you can you explain that a little further? The heaven and earth thing being inside of us?
Well, the book of Ecclesiastes has this great line, "You have put eternity into our hearts." And so when we grow old and we lose strength, or our situation changes, there's a longing for the past. And so there's this aspect to us that is eternal, and this aspect to us that is very much in what I call the age of decay. And we live between those two poles.
Okay, okay, so that's what the image I have of myself. Like I'd say it's me now, but when I'm 80, I'll be thinking of me this from this particular video. I'll watch it again. And then I'll be like, yeah, that's how I see myself now. Like that?
It'll be a little different because now that I'm in my mid 50s and can look back at myself on my 20s, it's a very interesting dynamic. But yes, very much like
Okay,
that.
well, I'm in my 30s, so
Okay.
a little bit ahead of the 20s.
Okay.
But you're like, girl, it doesn't matter. You're a baby. I know, I know how that looks when my
May you
kid.
grow old.
Well,
Um,
it's funny. My kids ask, like, well, because my son is turning 6 tomorrow, and well, I have 3 sons, but my middle guy is turning 6 tomorrow, and he would say things like, "Mommy, when I'm 6, will I still like whatever blank thing? Like, will I still like dinosaurs? Will I still, or Mommy, when I'm 6, I'll be able to do this." And it's sort of like a reverse thing of a
yes,
sort of
yes.
I'm gonna be able to, or being worried about, well, am I not gonna be me anymore when I'm 6? Or,
Uh,
well, I'll be old enough to do that thing. I'm nervous to do it now, but I think I'll be able to do it when I'm older. And yeah, so it's a weird. It's kids kind of do that too in a way, but yeah, that's an interesting. So so those examples of imagining yourself back or imagining yourself forward, those are the eternity along with the what is it?
the
Decaying dichotomy.
Yes, 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 yes. And it's in many ways not dissimilar to the ancient in again in the text that I'm preaching on this Sunday in Mark 8, Jesus says, what will you gain if you gain the world
Lose your
but
soul.
lose your and now if you pay attention to various translations, you'll see sometimes it's soul, sometimes it's life, and
Oh.
it's the psyche, and
Oh,
it's
is that the
this.
word used in Greek, like
That's
psyche?
right. That's right. The suke, and
Okay.
it's so soul, but depending on what age is making that translation, they're dealing with this question of what really am I? And that's the same question that was built into my grandmother's observation. What really am I? And this crisis between these two elements of ourselves is now on full display in the culture. And one of the manifestations that you can see it at is the whole gender dysphoria
Who am
epidemic,
I?
let's call
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Because and it's I don't think it's accidental that it was over these pronouns that Jordan Peterson kind of took off into the political sphere,
Okay.
because it's right here at the question of heaven and earth that we are working through these things. Now, this is a very important conversation, because we have for the last 100 years been working a line that says we are fundamentally animals that have an illusory experience of eternity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's, I think, a very dangerous position to have,
Yep.
because what it what see and I think it's a very I've been reading Timothy Snyder's Black Earth, and that whenever you read Timothy Snyder's books, that scares the heck out of you,
I
because
don't know. I'm not familiar with him. What?
he writes books about the middle of the 20th century. A lot of the
Oh.
stuff that Jordan Peterson was fascinated by: Nazism,
Okay.
communism, totalitarian governments.
Yeah.
And he's a historian, though. So whereas
Oh, okay.
Peterson is kind of pulling all these things together in sort of an integrated picture, Timothy Snyder's a historian.
Right.
But you begin to realize that in many ways, the middle of the 20th century was also, in a socio-political way, working through these issues,
Mm-hmm.
because basically what communism offered was an answer that, well, we are economic and class animals, and the
Mm-hmm.
state is our container.
Oh,
And
okay.
the Nazis basically said, no, we're just animals, and all of this second level eternity stuff, that's all from the Jews, and we got to get the Jewishness out of the world. And I never understood why they hated the Jews. In fact, I've got part of my ancestry is very Jewish. Distant relatives were wiped out in the Holocaust, which
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't know, but for a whole bunch of reasons. But I always wondered, what's at the heart of anti-Semitism? And you can understand some of the things throughout European history, but what's with the Nazis? And Timothy Snyder writes quite a bit about that. But he's saying basically we're animals and we have to get rid of the state and just let nature flourish. And
Mm.
that was sort of the Nazi ideal. And so what we're doing right now is we're wrestling with this question of, do we have souls? And
So that's the wait. That's at the heart of the meaning crisis,
I think the
in
struggle
your
between these
opinion.
two aspects,
Okay.
yes. And so Owen Barfield, he was a friend of C.S. Lewis, he comes in here with a very interesting take, because he looks at the evolution of consciousness
Yeah.
in this. And you begin to note all these interesting things in the Bible in terms of, and this gets played on and off throughout Christian history. For example, when you go to church and the priest elevates the host,
Mm-hmm.
is that the body of Christ? Now,
Yeah.
ask a Protestant, ask a Catholic,
I know, very
and
different.
yeah,
Transubstantiation is a fun
that's right.
subject. Yes. Yeah.
So very quickly, all of these ideas, this question of how do heaven and earth connect? And actually, if you understand it, and I just use those terms on Twitter today, and a lot of people, once you say heaven, they hear it in very religious terms, they sort of dismiss it. And so I try to translate it how to mind and body connect, because mind is
Right.
another way of thinking about it. And so these issues are all around us right now. And sort of what we've seen happen, and which I think is why Jordan Peterson made such a splash,
Okay.
is he noted he was getting at the connection of mind and body, and its conjunction, Peterson says, was meaning. And that's why one of his 12 rules is, and I remember one interview he's asked, which is the most important of your 12 rules. And he said, do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Because for Jordan Peterson, meaning is sort of this internal gyroscope that within a secular frame, because we're cut off from the heavens, because we don't believe any of that stuff, then you have to answer the question that you started with: what is right? How do you do the right thing? How can you know the good? And what Jordan basically says is follow meaning. Do something, and if you experience meaning, go in that direction. Now, I have issues with that take, because actually many of Jordan Peterson's opponents are doing exactly what Jordan Peterson advises them to do.
They're following
Jordan
their
Peterson
meaning.
adds, that's right, they're
Their
following the
meaning.
meaning, and that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, when
Now,
you look at the end of Judges, when it's like, and they all did what was right in their own eyes, right?
that's right.
And it wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't very good.
Take a look at the end of
So,
Judges, folks.
right. But then Jordan says that, but then Jordan is also out here playing with the Bible and saying this is kind of our foundation, so we shouldn't lose that. And so that's why conservative religious people listen to him and say, "Oh, he could be an ally."
Yeah.
But
Yeah, they do.
he's
But they're
but he's
not, but a lot of conservative religious people who I know, that's most people that I know in the offline world. Because I, like, for personally, I don't know, like, I am a Christian, but I don't fall in any denomination. I used to be evangelical, but I'm not. I'm a little, since listening to Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures, I've accepted evolution and such, like those kinds of,
really.
yeah.
I am gonna have you on my channel.
I know
gotta get
people,
this
when I
story.
tell people, they're like, wait, you started a Christian and then you listened to Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures and then went over to science? But I just found them as not mutually exclusive. That's all.
Right. Which isn't uncommon.
And
among
and
Christians.
most Jews actually find who wrote it. Like, they
And
wrote
many
Genesis.
Catholics and Orthodox too.
Okay. But I just think it's hilarious that a lot of Protestants get, no, 7 days. And I'm like, the Jews are fine with evolution for the most part. And they literally wrote the Bible, so. At least the Old Testament. Anyway, at least the part that we're talking about in Genesis.
And the New Testament too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, duh. Well, Luke
They're
was
all
a
Jews
Gentile.
too.
So, sir, we have a couple Gentiles who wrote a couple books. At least Luke. He
Really?
was
Name one.
Luke.
Luke? Was Luke a Gentile,
Yeah.
or was he a Jew born in the diaspora like Paul? I don't know.
Okay, I just assumed. I don't know. I've always okay. I am.
Was Luke circumcised? Here's the big question.
Oh my gosh! Oh, let's not even.
Here's
go
a title
there.
for you.
Oh, no. Anyway, getting into a little bit of splitting hairs here. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Just kidding, guys. We're getting into the weeds of theology here, so this is just some tangents. I don't usually go there in my videos. I don't usually do because I really don't enjoy discussing this with atheists that are like the new atheists, the Sam Harris Dawkins style, because they're so mean. And okay, you might be like, okay, I'm going mean from my word. Mean is like factual. like for me, I'm just like, I don't want to do this. It's not my idea of a good time, because they just want to convince me. They're throwing facts at me all the time, and I'm like, I don't care. But I do care. I do care. That's the thing. And I'm like, I don't want to make space in my casual Twitter day to go watch this video about why Jesus was a sham and then get back to you. I don't want to do that right now. That's not my idea of a good time in the midst of, oh, I have a break from my kids. They're having quiet time. I don't want to do that right now. So that's why I get a little bit like frustrated, even though I know I should be open to dialogue, but it doesn't feel like dialogue. It feels like shouting. It feels like they're shouting at me through Twitter. And I'm also a highly agreeable person. Some guys I know, they're like, just be like, no. I'm like, no, I can't. Anyways, I don't know if I'm going to keep this part. I'm going a little bit off the rails. Anyway, so, okay. Back to
the meaning
Luke
crisis.
was a Gentile. No, just kidding.
Well, we were talking about heaven and earth, body and soul.
Okay. Oh, I know about Jordan Peterson. And that
we're losing this partly because we've submitted.
Okay, the soul. Okay, so I was talking about Jordan Peterson and how I ended up coming over to evolution. But I still believe, but I'm not that literalist Christian. I am fine to look at the Bible as inspired, but it's written to people for a time. And it's not written for us, actually. It's written for them.
It was not written to us, but it was written for us, as John Walton says, which is kind of a nice way to say it.
Yeah, that's the distinction. So I am not, there's a certain audience. There's also certain genres that are used. There's poems, there's, apocalyptic writing, there's historical narrative, I'm telling you, and you know all these things. So but I'm telling the people. So there are all these different things that we have to consider that sort of alter it for me in my understanding. So what they mean, I think you even said it in one of your videos, like when Jesus says, the Son of Man must suffer and die. And to the Jews, that's a signaling something. That's right. To Daniel 7. And to the, even at the time, to the non-Jews, to the Gentiles or to whoever it is that are non-Jewish peoples, they would have no idea what that meant. Same for us. We might, if you don't know what Son of Man refers to. So there's a lot of code. It's like not
there's meant a lot to be of code.
Coded. I'm not trying to be like the codes in the Bible. I'm not one of those.
The Bible code.
I know. I'm not trying to be like that. But so to me, I have like people are like, wow, that's a lot of effort to understand this book. And I'm like, yes, it is. Yes.
Why can't God make it simple? Have you lived in this world? Have you looked at what it was like to be a human being?
Well, I think it's because you can look at other religions and be like, well, what about reading those texts and put the effort to understand them? And I'm like,
go ahead, learn Arabic.
You could.
Read the Quran.
You could, but you absolutely could. But
you won't.
That's not
neither
my
will I.
No, my religion is this, and I think it's the best one. That's why I'm still a Christian. Like, that's the thing that is difficult for me to explain is, why do you believe it? Because I think it's the best one. That's why.
And if you didn't, you would switch.
I would.
But that whole platform now, what you just illuminated, that is part of the meaning crisis too.
Okay.
Because
let's circle back.
and this is sort of what Tom Holland said in that Delingpod interview that I played in a number of videos, where he notes that in some ways, when Christianity went out, especially in the colonial period, what it did was it brought two religions. It brought confessional Christianity that, was only marginally successful in terms of taking in these lands that the British and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish tried to colonize. But then there was this other underneath thing, which is sort of the platform of pluralism, let's call it secularism, that relativized all religions and at this late date now makes us religious consumers.
Oh, can you explain further what you mean by that? I didn't see what you're mentioning. So,
well, the fact that you said, well, I think Christianity's right, and so I'll stick with it.
Yeah.
What that, in a sense, does is disembeds you from Christianity and says, my religion is a matter of choice.
Okay.
That's a modern move.
Does it make me a heretic?
No, it doesn't. It
Okay.
makes you modern.
Okay.
And it makes you no longer, let's say, naive in terms of this is just the way the world is. Now, in a sense, you transcend from your embeddedness within these religions and says, I imagine myself religion free who can now choose different religions.
Okay.
Okay. That's again part of what I talked about with in a traditional society, you were born embedded,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no outside of the world that you were embedded in. Now, in
Right.
a sense, we're all sort of floating above it, um, opting as consumers for
Okay, because
different
people
things.
didn't have a right, because you're born into it, you don't have a choice. It is whatever you're born into
Well, what?
before.
Well, but you see, we're getting to radical edges of this because what if I were to come to you today and say, "Why is it that you identify as female?"
Okay. Oh, right. We were talking about the gender thing and I totally went off on a tangent. Sorry. Okay. We're
So,
coming back
so
there.
now I think 50 years ago, even,
Yeah.
if you were to ask someone that, they would look at you like,
You were crazy.
what, what? That's, or why do you identify as human? And now I have friends who I live in a very new agey part, and we live in Calgary, so it can be pretty new agey there too. But I am a spiritual being having a physical experience. So I have friends that believe those kinds of things.
Okay.
So, but even so, you've got furries and a bunch of people who say I identify as a very large cat, let's say. And yeah, I know you laugh, but this is but in a sense, when you're looking at the menu of religious or worldview options and you say, I choose this one,
Mm-hmm.
there's an I that exists that didn't used to exist in many traditional cultures.
Okay. Okay. I can see this. Right. Well, then how did anyone ever convert to Christianity back when it was new?
Good question. I don't know what it's like looking at that from the inside because the Apostle Paul did. I don't know that. See, in a sense, I
Or convert
can't
to
answer
any
that question.
religion. Because any, well,
Right.
I guess
Because
anyone, right?
because it looks it's there's both an inside and an outside perspective on this.
Uh huh.
Because in a sense, once you're within a worldview, you can't help but see that worldview from within.
Mm-hmm.
But yet at the same time, we're looking from the outside at others. And this is where you get into some of the Barfield inside outside stuff. I don't know.
Aren't we all in our own worldview, though? How can anyone be
Exactly. And that is
outside of
very
it?
true. But we do approach, and increasingly so, we do approach fundamental identity aspects as menu options for a life that we choose,
Okay.
and in a way that past generations couldn't conceive of.
Right. Okay.
And that's very true, and it's very true of our religious perspective.
So, how does this relate to the meaning crisis then?
Well, so part of what happens, John Vervaeke and Christopher Mastro Pietro have an excellent video on the symptoms of the meaning crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and what they talk about, in a sense, is this the burden of choosing identity and the lack of foundness. Now, these are my own words I'm putting on it. The lack of foundness
Mm-hmm.
as a burden. So let's say you were born to parents that said, "Oh, and well, Andrea, we're just going to call them and so at some point, and can choose to put a Y on Ann's name and become Andy, or can put an REA on the end and become Andrea. But we're going to be very careful and never gender anything in their world until they get to a certain age. Now,
Okay.
certain people are trying this now.
Yeah, babies.
Right. And is that what they're called? Babies?
Babies, yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So, so, but here's a question.
Okay.
What burden have they put on that child? Because when I was growing up, I was a boy.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have to think about what it meant to be a boy. Everything that I did was just boy
Mm-hmm.
because it was me. I was a boy. I was innocent of that choice. Now we seem to be imagining we are blessing people by launching them into this these into these hallways, these netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing this with religion for a number of years, where people would say, well, I'm a Christian, my wife was Jewish, so we're going to raise them without any religion. And when they get old enough, they get to choose. What that
Mm-hmm.
posits is that there's a space of no religion. And what that means is now suddenly there's a burden of, I now have to self-create.
Okay.
What does that say about who and what I really am? I am a cipher. I am a blank sheet of paper. And at some point, I'm going to ask myself, what exactly is the I that is attempting to choose these things? And so there's this real there's um, this real vacuum that we are trying to act out of. And what people are beginning to discover, so, well, I am an animal, that I can know. So I'm an animal, but what happens, and you'll hear Jordan Peterson, Vervaeke, many others, what happens if I live, so what? I can make all these menu choices, so what? At some point, this animal is going to die. Any contemplation of the me in my grandmother, let's say, who doesn't age, that me is illusory. And so this I, which both has the burden of ultimate choice and yet is nothing, is gone in an instant, never to be known again,
Right.
not situated in the world. And where Vervaeke takes this, Vervaeke and Mastro Pietro, is in the zombie. So the zombie becomes the monster of the meaning crisis, if you will, who is continually trying to devour brains. We're on YouTube and we're Twitter and we're just trying to consume the minds of others, but
That's
never being full.
horrifying.
Yeah.
That is.
But that's how we are, isn't it?
I watched The Walking Dead. Like, I watched it for a time and then I couldn't anymore because it was just too much.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my. Okay, I read something about the zombie, but I couldn't finish it because I had to talk with you. I was reading. But I didn't know what it meant. Like, I started reading a letter between Vervaeke and someone else on the website letter.wiki,
Yep, yep.
and talking about the Joker
Yeah.
as
And see,
as
and now we're moving from zombie to
as
Joker.
replacing the zombie. And I didn't know what he meant by zombie though, because I'm not familiar enough with Vervaeke's earlier work.
Well, here
So
we are consuming the brains of Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke and Sam Harris, and we're just consuming the brains.
but okay. Our little brain consuming machines. But
That's
the
right.
thing is, like, people have always been able to like consume the brains of like authors in books.
Right. Right.
Not always, but for a time, since books have been available since the printing press.
The meaning crisis is the crisis and emptiness of the brain consumer, because the zombie always eats but is never
Never full.
satisfied.
So people back then were more satisfied?
Well, they were actually embedded in a they were
Oh,
embedded in an entire
oh,
story of
right.
heaven and earth.
Right.
And we are now in a little iron box of secularism. We can't see the stars to navigate by. So maybe we work from a little meaning compass within us, but we're cut off from eternity. And everyone tells us eternity is an illusion. You are only, because the zombie cannot talk. The zombie cannot function on the level of the soul.
And this is what Vervaeke says?
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff he's
Okay,
working
I
on.
have
Yeah.
to like do a deep dive. Okay.
Well, the problem is there's a lot there.
I know,
so...
that's why I haven't started, because I'm like, I don't even know. Okay, here's the thing. Actually, no, there's a couple things.
And I'll just say with Vervaeke, watch the one about zombies with him and Mastro Pietro, and the one on symptoms of the meaning crisis, and then watch other interviews.
Okay.
Because he lands the plane quite a bit more quickly in the other interviews. If you do his whole course, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, there's 50 hours. So just be warned.
Okay. Well,
and Andrew Sweeney has been blogging on Medium summaries of Vervaeke.
Oh,
that's
okay.
another good way
I'm gonna write that down.
That's another good way to get at what Vervaeke is doing.
Okay. So the thing is, in Christianity, though, the material, like the body, is emphasized, though.
Yes, it is.
Right?
And it doesn't go away. We are raised from the dead.
But yeah, and that's the whole like thing against Gnosticism and
that's correct.
And Docetism and all those other little sects or heresies, I guess, depending on how you view them.
That's right.
For, I guess, those of you who don't know what Gnosticism is, it's the idea that Jesus just came in spirit, not physically. And the sort of bodily resurrection when
he acted Thomas, as if he had a body.
Right, but no, yeah, it was the idea of like put your hands in touch the scars, touch my side. I'm a physical being, you know.
Watch me eat a fish.
Yeah, so that is very emphasized in the Christian worldview, that we are bodily beings with depth and soul and spirit.
Yes.
I remember my mom used to
We're a living nefesh.
Tripartite beings.
We are the stuff of earth and the breath of God.
Right.
Genesis 2.
Right. So it's a balance, I suppose.
It's both and.
Okay.
Because balance assumes it's both
Either
and.
Or,
it's a complete integration.
It's integrated. Okay, so it's an integrated system. And the idea of pulling away one, like the Gnostics wanted to just have spiritual, but now our scientism friends want it to just be physical. And to me, it just seems, even coming from a pragmatic, like, well, what works the best? And this is what I've sort of observed, all of the different peoples who survived atrocious times, you know, in the Gulag, or people who were in, well, not necessarily, like, because I know Viktor Frankl, was he religious? He wasn't religious, was he?
Not really.
No.
Not that I could tell from. I've only read one of his books, Man's Search for Meaning, which is an excellent book.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, he always said the best of them didn't make it. Anyway, but well, there's not much room for altruism in a concentration camp. But at least in the Gulag accounts that I've read Solzhenitsyn. And I mean, part of it, I haven't, it's so big, but I've read, and then someone else actually came out, like did a Twitter thread of a guy who was similar to Solzhenitsyn, but his stuff was like buried since the 70s. And It was, I wish I would have written this guy's name down, but similar sort of testimonial of what the people who always ended up making it through, or at least not bowing down and not having their spears broken, even if they literally died. Those who made it through were the ones who had faith. Right, so they said, like, you know, the Orthodox, like priests or that's not, because they're Orthodox, so they don't have those. But the people who were religious.
Orthodox have priests.
They do have priests. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking like
Protestants
Catholic, but so they do have priests. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I studied this. I should know. Anyway, it's been a while. It's been like 10 years. But yeah, so those who were like really had a deep faith were the ones who would stand up. Like I remember reading this one woman about this woman who they took in the beginning of the Gulag archipelago, and she says to the guards there, she wasn't even in the Gulag yet, she was just being like in the holding facility, and she's like, she looked at them and she's like, there's nothing you can do to me. You can kill me, but I don't care because I know where I'm going, and you don't even know what to do with me because you're looking at him and you're afraid that he's going to report you for not doing the proper things to break me, and then he's afraid that you will do the same to him, and I win, basically, is what she's saying. She's like 80, and they let her go because they did not know what to do with her.
Right.
And I just like, it blew my mind. Because she also was super old. I mean, honestly, if you're like, I've lived my life, like but she also had this sort of, she had something they didn't understand, something that was beyond, and like she had her meaning, I guess.
Yeah.
And it just, it seems to work. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
In the storm, you don't know, like if you have a calm sea, you're not really a sailor until you weather a storm. That's what true. It seems like to me. So, and again, there are a lot of people who could break though, like who are like, oh, well, you could come up with, well, these Christians, they broke, like they denied their faith. You can come up with as many
look
stories.
At Peter.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's why it's nice that we have grace.
Under the withering assault of a slave girl warming herself by the fire.
He did.
Denies him, not once, not twice.
3 times.
Thrice.
Yes. You're right. And that's why it is nice that we're not damned to hell if we do deny. But there's just these stories that have really stood out of the people who can be stronger than a totalitarian threat of death, are the ones who have something to hold on to that is bigger than our physical world. And that's the thing that I'm like, some Buddhist monks might have this. I don't know. I don't want to act like I have read all the stories of people who can go into another plane, you know what I mean? So I might be wrong in this, but it seems like those who have a grasp on that eternity bit in the hard times, and I mean hard times like not North American, Western Europe hard times. Maybe Western,
we're having a recession.
Well, I know. So maybe Western Europe in World War II, and Eastern Europe and during and all of Russia during the Cold War and whatnot during the Soviet Union. Those are the hard times I'm thinking of. It seems so. That's what I mean by the pragmatic. It seems to work better than, oh yeah, we just rely on ourselves and our own sort of moral compass from within. That doesn't seem to weather the hardest times. It seems like you need something outside of yourself to be striving for, and that's where they could say, okay, so the good as opposed to the God. And so that's where Peterson doesn't go far enough for some. And but then the scientism folks are like, yeah, Peterson's wrong anyway. So there's different categories.
You're hitting exactly. So Richard Dawkins and Joe Rogan sit there and say, I don't know why everyone in the ancient world came out religious. And it's like, you know how bad the world was? I mean, it's a breeding ground for religion, for exactly the dynamic you just put your finger on. Mm-hmm. And why is the greatest cause of death due to meaning crisis suicide? And it's happening in the affluent West. Right. Well, it's for all of those reasons you just described.
Okay, what about, and I'm going to do sort of devil's advocate here because I know that's going to happen with my secular audience. I don't actually even know. I don't know what, I know on Twitter I have a very, very atheist space because I'm in intellectual Twitter, which is mostly atheist Twitter. So, okay. We've come to a new age, though. We don't have to live in the past anymore, Paul. We know better now. We know better. So what we have facts and we have science and we have seen where religious fanaticism, aka the Crusades, aka I don't know, Maoist China, like the religion was the state.
They
Same with
won't use that
Russia.
one.
Well, no, but they say the religion. I've heard them say it's the religion became the state. Same
Oh,
with Russia or
yeah.
Soviet
Well,
Union. The religion became the state. So
they never look more deeply at the Nazis because it would terrify them if they did.
well, because the Nazis were technically Lutheran.
You got to read Timothy Snyder.
Okay.
Because basically, so Hitler's first attempt at taking over Germany landed him in jail.
Okay.
And he learned from that. And what he learned was you're going to have to be really sneaky about the religion thing. You're going to have to come at it from below.
Okay.
And you're going to have to supplant it and corrupt it. You can't directly deny it because Germany was a very Christian country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the heart of
my
Luther.
approach to people that come at that is simply patience. Because I'll tell you something, live in this world long enough, tragedy will find you.
And Peterson says that too. But like, what about people like Dawkins? He's lived in this world for a while. He still contends that there is this mind virus thing.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to go away, but it's also not going to get the kind of traction they imagine it will.
Okay, so let's go over to Bret. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay.
Well, like what Bret
from New Jersey, we interrupt each other all the time.
Okay.
If two people aren't talking at once, we're not having a conversation.
I'm just a nice little Canadian girl. Pardon me, sir. Okay.
I know Western Canadians. My brother-in-law is one. Don't pull that. Western Canadians.
Okay, but what about the idea of we're just looking at, because what Bret is saying, I'm trying to think. I do want to come back to like, okay, well, what kind of religion does Bret want? That's what I'm a little bit fuzzy on. He doesn't want a religion. He wants something.
Right,
so I do want to come back to.
He doesn't want to call it a religion.
A something, yeah, but a thing, like a thing that God is dead and we've killed him and we replaced it with nothing. Well, what's the thing we replace it with? I do want to go there, but what about if we look at people who say, well, we have science. We don't have to be superstitious anymore. That's kind of what Bret was saying. We can keep the wisdom, but we don't need the superstition anymore.
Right.
We don't need, we can think, I mean, and even if he agreed with Peterson.
See, but
like,
he doesn't what does. He
but,
right.
but like the nice, because even Peterson doesn't go far enough for some. He has the idea of, oh, we have the archetype of Christ. Take up your cross. That's what suffering is. That's what life is. It's suffering. So if we take up our cross willingly and walk towards our deaths with our heads held high, meaningful life, boom, done.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And then we die.
But Vervaeke is actually, Vervaeke and Bret are sort of, Vervaeke has thought through quite a bit more what Bret is sort of wishing for.
Okay.
Because Vervaeke says we need practices, we need community, we need all of these things that religion used to provide.
Right.
Because without those things, we are suffering. Bret hasn't gotten that far in his thought.
Okay.
Bret just imagines that. This is why, again, I say the IDW is more political. Bret just imagines that, well, there are political solutions to these issues. And I would argue, and I think Vervaeke is right, that in the 20th century, we saw a variety of political solutions or attempts at political solutions to the meaning crisis. One of them was communism. One of them was fascism. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that these ideologies then sort of take the place. But Peterson's critique, I think, is important. Peterson notes that these ideologies are sort of crippled religions. And what I think Peterson means by that is that what they don't afford is the full universe, the full story in which we can inhabit. And the reason we know that people are hungry for these stories is because we watch them Try and live in the Harry Potter world. Try and live in the Star Wars world. Try and live
In the
and
Avengers world?
yeah, in the Avengers world, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And there's this great video that was out a number of years ago on College Humor that basically made the observation Star Wars nerds and religious people are doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that video was exactly right, because to be religious means here we go to the house of the Lord. Here we offer our gifts to him. Here we hear the word of God. Here we live our life within the kingdom of God. That is what religion does. And so, in a sense, what John Vervaeke is looking for is, well, let's regain the functionality within a secular context. But, and John and I are quite open about this, I'm dubious about his project because as I'm saying increasingly now, and hopefully, that the story verse is our machine code. That because again, this part that doesn't decay is an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
That's the code that links in our little story to our family story and our tribal story and our national story and our religious story.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we navigate this world, because story, I just caught a great clip today of a philosopher, University of Texas. He's teaching on Plato. He makes the observation, every time Plato doesn't quite know can't quite explain something, he tells a story. And that's how we are, because story is our machine code.
Yes.
And the problem that we have is the story we are getting from secularity says story itself is illusory. It might be fun, but it isn't real.
Okay, see, and I have spoken with some, like a friend of mine who really so my friend Jay Shapiro, I've had him on a couple times, but he wants to do like an old-fashioned sort of religion versus atheism sort of debate with me, and I'm like, I just am not.
You're not that kind of person.
Ready? Well, it wouldn't be a
You're
debate.
high in agreeableness.
You
got to be low in agreeableness for something
so
like that.
It would be a discussion, though. Again, he's actually pretty nice with me, to be honest.
Have Esther do it. She'd love it.
Okay. Oh, she would, and I'm so not. It wouldn't be a debate. It would be a discussion, to be honest. But I told him, like, man, I'm not ready. But like, I'm starting to open up a bit more, because again, I don't enjoy that. What I get after, if like after this video, I'm like, I don't know what kind of comments I'll be having to deal with. Not because I'm afraid, because I don't enjoy putting time to talk with brick walls. It's
Send them to the Discord server. There's plenty of people who want to talk to them there. Okay. There's plenty of people on their side there. So
okay, yeah, I know, yeah.
There.
So okay.
And in fact, my meetup groups have been small groups basically about the meaning crisis.
Okay.
Because we have atheists and Christians, and we're not having apologetic debates like that.
No.
We're talking about this crisis that we have in common, because it affects Christians too.
Okay, and he is like, oh, I just think it's important to get started talking about these things. Yeah. And I agree with that. And so I need to, at some points, I'll say yes, but I just am not.
You want to start a meetup in Calgary? I've got people that'll help you.
I could. I don't know if I have the time. I put most of the time into
you've got little kids.
That's and then this is that's where my time goes. But anywho, it's something to do. I brought him up because in the past he has suggested about the whole story thing. He's like, yes, I agree, story is important. Let's get better stories. He just thinks that there's better stories than the Christ story. And I'm like, okay, I mean, humor him though. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what stories he means. And I'm like, well, I mean, Tolkien did a pretty good job in writing another story, but I'm like, well, but England didn't adopt it as their story though. Like and he didn't even want it to be the replacement to religion. But what I mean is, I'm like, okay, well, and I gotta ask. I mean, this will be what I ask him next time I have him on. What stories? What?
Why in all these stories? I mean, look at Luke Skywalker, look at Lord of the Rings, look at Harry Potter. You can find Christ in all those stories.
I don't know. Wouldn't people, Buddhists, be like, yeah, you can find Buddha in all of them too? I don't
Oh,
know.
you can. These are archetypal stories.
Yeah.
And
The hero,
and
well,
but
the hero, the
that's right.
archetypal arch, well, we see Christ as the arch hero, but
The
different.
dying and rising God. C.S. Lewis worked through this stuff. So the Inklings, again,
Yeah.
these are guys that fought in World War One.
Hmm.
And they came out of World War One, and you know the world was ripped apart inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lewis and Tolkien, the Inklings were an attempt to sit down and share with each other the kinds of stories they wanted to hear.
Hmm.
Nobody else was writing them, so they started writing them themselves. That's where we get Lord of the Rings. That's how we got Narnia, because they knew they needed, but it's that one question that one student asked Jordan Peterson: why can't we just write the archetypal story? And it's because the story has to, that's where you get into Aristotle, the story has to take on the the stuff of our world for us to be able to connect with it.
So
We're
you can't just
not
come up with, like, there's something, what am I saying? There's there's something that has to be inspire. It has to be a sort of inspiration that isn't common.
well,
Is
it also
that
has to be battle tested.
right?
And
Which is why certain stories won't go away. But that's the thing. It's not like Christianity does not stand up alone. Look at Islam. And I find that very problematic.
well,
The teachings of Islam, because I mean I've studied it. I'm reading Yasmin Muhammad's book Unveiled. It's, and I already knew lots of it, but this is like a look inside what a fundamentalist Muslim household, and I'm like, it's. I mean, and she's like, it isn't, like, to me she's like, it's all lies. Is what she's coming from that perspective, but for all religion. So she's like, she's an ex-Muslim, and she doesn't have any religion now, and I can
right.
understand to an extent why, because that religion really, really did a number on her. And but it still persists though.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could ask a billion Muslims and they're like, yeah, yeah, ours is the right one. Yeah, there's also a billion Christians you could ask, and they'll be like, yeah, no, ours is the right one. So that's, I kind of, if yeah,
Well,
I kind of am not sure
you've
what to
got
do with
that with
that.
people look at that as if that's a defeater, but that's just a human thing. Ask a billion people, or ask people, Democrats or Republicans. Well, they'll pick one. In Canada, you got more parties to choose from.
Yeah.
And people just choose different things. And people are like, well, that means nothing is true. Well, no, that's not right. It
But
means
but
that,
the standing the test of time thing.
yeah, it's a big deal.
Well, but I mean, Muhammad's story has not stood it as long, but it's about what, 450 years older or younger than Christianity. It's still very present.
Oh yeah, yeah. With these, we're very instant people in our culture. These things take long times to work through. But where are the temples to Marduk? Where are the temples to Augustus? And so, in many ways, that which endures is that which endures.
So we'll see. And the battle between Islam and Christianity, I guess we'll see, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. It's a 1,300-year-old battle, but
Because Islam is not going away by any means. Because
nope,
it
nope.
fulfills something, though.
Sure,
It fulfills a need.
absolutely. It gives meaning.
So what do we do with that, though? We're like, oh no, but Jesus is the way, and like he
You
stood the test of
you
time. And then people bring up, okay, well, what about Islam, though?
you be a Christian.
You mean
That's what you do.
that? So the I mean the sort of,
That's
let's
always the answer.
functionally live it out and see
Yes.
which.
Well, just do it. Just be a Christian. Be a Christian to your children. Be a Christian to your husband. Be a Christian to your neighbor. Be a Christian in your city.
But then I get the then I get the, well. So what, be the verses where Jesus says, I came to not bring peace but a sword.
You're going to have to
That's what I
work
need
all
to
that.
be.
You're going to have to work all that stuff through. And what your videos are doing is you're working all that stuff through.
I
It's do
know.
the work you're already doing.
Ah, Paul, there's so many, there's not easy answers, man.
No, they're not. No,
It's
they're
all,
not.
but this gets into the weeds though. Like people pick out verses to throw,
Yeah.
and to me, I think a lot is metaphorical and not literal. And again, who's the audience that's being spoken to? But okay, so just live it, and that's what I've seen.
It's not just, it's hard.
No, but that's what I mean. Like if I'm looking at it from, well, what is the best way to be? And again, I'm doing that modern thing you described earlier about, well, for me, from my testimony of what my life has shown, if I live as if we're all embodying the divine logos and we're all starting at the same space, no
We're
one's
not all
better
starting
than.
at the same.
Wait, we're
It's
not?
not true. No, no, no,
What?
no. Democracy is a new thing. You were
Well,
born with advantages.
okay, no. I mean, like literally, like no one's. We're all born in a fallen world.
See now, well, yeah, that's
That's
true.
what I mean.
But
I don't think I'm better than so and so or so and so.
and this is part of the trick here, because before I said, okay, you're in a sense dislocated. It's you choosing from a menu,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a dislocation, there's an alienation there. But some of the democratic stuff that you've just said before, there's your foundness. That's what you're born into. That's in a sense the default perspective that you're working from, and that is itself a perspective.
Okay.
And it's helpful to see that, because in a weird way, this meaning crisis is itself a thing too.
Wait.
This gets very meta. I don't want to go all Jordan
What?
Hall on you.
Okay. What do you mean by a thing too?
There's in a sense the myth of the outside that we have in our culture. I can step out of the religion in which I was raised in and choose another. What's interesting is that former evangelicals who become atheists, they still act like evangelicals. They're just pushing other things.
I find people who leave Christianity and become atheists to be the most intense in their beliefs of atheism.
Isn't that funny?
I do see that.
Yeah.
They're vehemently.
Yeah. So we can't escape our formation, even though in this culture we have such angst and alienation from it.
Okay, but wait. But is that not a sort of Christian way of thinking?
Oh, it's deeply Christian.
Well, no, but I mean to think that we're starting, like I'm not better than others. Is that not?
Yes. That's very Augustinian of you.
It's all what?
Okay. It's very Augustinian of you.
Oh, is it?
It's very, very total depravity-ish. We're all sinners.
Oh, I hate total. No, I don't want to say I hate it, but I'm not a fan of total depravity.
No.
But I do think we're all I don't think I'm better than anyone else, because we're all lost.
You're a good democratic person. That's good.
But you don't think that other people from other societies who are also Christians would have that same perspective?
Oh, that's deeply Christian.
That's what I mean. Okay, because when I've tweeted this out about how I'm like, I don't think I'm better than anyone else. I think that we're all image bearers.
It's Romans 1, 2, and 3. That's where it comes from.
And I got like a lot of, not a lot, but a bit of pushback. Like, you don't think you're better than mass murderers? You don't think you're better than Hitler or Stalin? And it's very foreign to some to hear that. I've sort of grown up believing that. And it's kind of it's a sort of, it makes, for me, it's sort of freeing to not go around like making a hierarchy of where you fit. But I know we can't escape hierarchies though. But we're that's what actually a question I've had that's not really, it is maybe to do with the first shall be last and the last shall be first principle. It's literally our material, even evolutionary world of hierarchies turned on its head. And what is that? What do we do with that? I'm not free of hierarchical thinking.
And you shouldn't be.
But
you can't help
but me
deal
going
with
around
hierarchies.
thinking that I am not better than anyone else.
Right.
It sort of has this sort of thing.
You are not better than anyone else with regard to what?
My
God is not.
point,
God is that you have within yourself the potential of being a Nazi prison guard or a communist gulag officer.
Right.
You have, and again, this is where Peterson comes along, and he's very Augustinian in his anthropology, because he says when you go visit Auschwitz, you should understand that there, but he doesn't say it this way, because there, but for the grace of God go I. It's deeply Christian. What happens in Christianity is, if you have eyes to see how Jesus talks about status and hierarchies, he's playing with these things all the time, because the Roman Empire was very stratified.
Yeah.
And so you could find this, the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke is full of this. And when I don't know if I reach back on these shelves, but someone recently was asking, is my favorite commentary on the Gospel of Luke by Joel Green. Really turned my eyes to a lot of that. Yeah, that's a big commentary. When I was going through the book of First Peter, I began to notice how Jesus takes these things and is always working these ideas of status. You see it in Philippians 2.
Right.
Jesus, although he's very nature God, which is, you can't get any higher in the hierarchy, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited, but became a slave and suffered the death of a slave. And because he did that, he is elevated to the highest place. And you see this in Christianity all the time. Because Jesus, the disciples are elbowing each other for supremacy.
To get the first place in the kingdom.
And what does Jesus say to them?
That's the first shall be last verse, I'm pretty sure, right?
He says, well, he looks around and there's a little boy in the room, in this rented room.
Oh, unless you have the faith of a child, is that it? Okay.
Well, not the faith, but he says, unless you're like that child. What do you mean like that child? Why is that child in that room? That child's in that room taking dishes. That child is acting as an unpaid servant. Probably in the rented room. And Jesus is, and then John 13, when Jesus comes in and he's about to show them the extent of his love, he strips down, wraps a towel around himself, and is going to wash their feet. And how does Peter respond?
No, I can't remember. No, that's Master, you can't be doing this for us.
That's right. And Peter said,
Peter.
That's right. And Jesus says, unless you let me wash your feet, you can have no part of me. And Peter's like, then wash all of me. And Jesus says, feet's enough.
Oh, that Jesus.
But if you pay attention to these things, they're throughout the Gospels and throughout the New Testament that Jesus both brings an equality. Among you there shall be no masters. That's how it works in the Gentiles. But you're all brothers and sisters. So he brings a certain equality among them, but there's still very much a hierarchy. So there's actually both. And Jesus is modulating both of them throughout the Gospels. And that gets embedded into Christianity. And that's why when you say in the increasingly post-Christian world, I'm no better than the people who have done these atrocities. See, already out there, people are like, oh no, because they've already modified the system to have good guys and bad guys.
Right.
And, well, we're part of the good guys. And then there's those other people over there. And, well, now.
But how do you know you wouldn't if you were there? How do you know?
And what happens, Rene Girard is really good at this, because here's the thing. When you list yourself, and Solzhenitsyn did the same thing, when you list yourself among the good people, well, you've just, in a sense, elevated yourself,
Yeah.
forgiven yourself,
Yeah.
turned a blind eye to everything, and are now pointing the finger at the other. And
Yeah.
who in Scripture is the accuser? That's the kingdom of Satan. It's
Right.
the accusation.
Right.
And so when they come to arrest Jesus, Peter takes a sword, chops off the ear of the high priest's servant. Jesus says, put that away, puts the ear back on, take me. And
Okay.
Jesus says, anybody's blood's going to be shed, let it be mine.
Okay, but what do you think about that verse? I can't remember where it was, but the one about the Jesus saying, I haven't come to bring peace but a sword.
Yeah, he's bringing division. And he does. He brings terrible division in the world.
Okay, that's what I said. That it's more like a sort of projecting into the future.
But
shouldn't
Jesus
he be
and
bringing
peace.
Shouldn't it be love and peace and sort of what it like a bringing together rather than tearing apart?
Sure. But people don't want things brought together. Now in the US, depending on which side you're on, the blue or the red states, do you want peace? No. What do you want? We can't. Peace is irresponsible.
Okay.
No justice, no peace, right? That's the cry.
Right. Okay.
And so, no, we want love, but they don't deserve love.
Okay, so it's him saying what it's going to be, not what. There are sometimes two different things I've seen in the Bible. It talks about give to the poor, and then the poor will always be among you. Well,
Yeah,
which is it?
good?
Which is it?
Oh, it's both.
But sometimes it's speaking to what you should do, and sometimes it's speaking to what will be happening and what, because we know it's like human nature will always take over, but it doesn't mean you don't strive to eradicate poverty, but it will always be there. So is that sort of the dichotomy of what's like, well, he is like, blessed are the peacemakers, but also I will bring division. Because that's what's going to happen.
Well, think about it this way. There was a culture war going on in the first century. Mm-hmm. Okay? You have the Romans and the Jews who were collaborating with the Romans and all these different factions that had a menu of option for dealing with this crisis. Kill the Romans, go hide in the desert, fight a subtle culture war about religious observance and subtle little culture cues. Mm-hmm. These people hated each other. They could all agree that the world would be better without Jesus.
Okay.
So did Jesus bring unity? Yeah, he did. How? They all agreed he should die.
Okay.
So did he bring conflict? Yeah, he did. All the conflict was pointed at him.
Right. That Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. So people look at Jesus today. Oh, Jesus is so loving and tolerant and nice. And it's like, first of all, you haven't read the Gospels.
Right.
Because second of all, whether or not you believe in the resurrection, to the degree that you accept any history about Jesus, the one thing in history that was the most foundational historic fact is that they killed him. Why would they kill him?
Well, they killed other messiahs too.
Well, what kind of a messiah was he? He was the wrong kind of messiah.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Because there were lots of others who said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get a group of people together. We're going to get a big Twitter following, a big YouTube following. We're going to get all these people. We're going to infiltrate them with our ideas. And then we're going to have them vote, or we're going to arm them. Then we're going to take this city and that city and that city, and we're going to win the world. Jesus didn't do that.
Right.
And that could very well be why Judas jumped ship, because everyone's kind of waiting for Jesus to do this.
To do the thing, to do the
thing, to do the Alexander the Great thing, to do the Augustus thing, to do the Obama or the Trump thing, to do that kind of thing.
The Genghis Khan thing.
The Genghis Khan thing. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to do the craziest thing you can imagine in this game. I'm going to lose. And I'm not just going to lose littly, I'm going to lose bigly.
Wow.
And when I do this, I'm going to win. And people say, well, I don't believe in the resurrection. Then you have no idea why he won and keeps winning.
Well, that's the thing, is he does keep winning in the hearts and minds of so many people. He's not going away, even if you don't believe. Even if, and this brings us over to Bret, even if I am talking about all of these, okay, let's just say, like, even if I didn't believe, even if I was coming at it from a secular standpoint, you could still be like, okay, so he is winning though in so many circles. Well, how do we supplant that? Because you can't just take it away. You can't just be like, no science, because that doesn't replace it. It's not. It isn't the proper system. It's not a community. It's not a, you go to science church and you connect with other fellow science people, and then you go home and then you have potlucks with those science people. Like, there's not a community everyday life the way that, say, church is. It seems like Bret, and maybe I guess Vervaeke as well, from what you've described, I'm not as familiar with his work, but that they want to come up with a something that I don't know if it's not necessarily scientific, but a something to bring people together to replace not just Christianity. Yeah, in the West it's Christianity, sure, but
well, they very much want it scientific.
Well, oh, they do want it, but okay,
oh yeah, they want it scientific.
Okay,
that's the thing that they needed to have. They needed
because
to
that's
have
what they
that
believe
credibility.
in. Okay, they believe in that, even though they don't say it's belief, they say it's facts, but they do believe in it. See, that's where they get upset though, because I've seen people, Jordan Peterson, do this. Well, I know that you're arguing against me, but the fact that you're sitting here using your logos to talk to me is actually me winning. And I would be really annoyed too if someone said that to me, like, well, your billions of years of evolution, even though I do believe in evolution, but whatever, is actually the thing that is culminated in your mind and your logic and your beliefs and whatever, that reptile brain that is whatever, like, corresponding with the frontal lobe, that's what's making you talk about believing in Jesus. Like, I don't really love that as a win, as like, I win because of the depth of the things I believe that's inside of you speaking out. But I don't know how it can work. Like, if I am, say, talking with people who aren't in the religious sphere, who are saying, oh yeah, there's a meaning crisis, we need to do something about it. Well, what do we do? And like, you are saying, yeah, there is, and Jesus is the answer.
Find a church.
Right? I know,
that's
but
what
like,
I say.
but
Find
that's
a church.
an old answer is the thing. That's the old answer.
It is.
It is. Like, I don't even say it. I usually just ask the questions because I want to hear people's perspectives. And I'm legitimately curious as well, as like, okay, well, what's the answer to this meaning crisis then? Because it always stays, I don't get a real answer. I've never gotten a real answer.
Was it something that you can just put out there?
Well, other than,
or is it something that you have to live? Again, another thing from Vervaeke is his 4 Ps. There's 4 ways of knowing. There's propositional.
Yeah.
There's perspectival. There's participatory, and there's procedural.
Okay.
And if we're talking like this,
yeah,
the propositional will be forefronted because just of the medium we're using. Okay. And that's an issue, but you don't live in that medium. That medium's an aspect. That logos is an aspect of our life. But at the beginning of the Gospel of John, the logos becomes flesh and tabernacles among us. Mm-hmm. So it's participatory, it's procedural, it's perspectival. And so the answer to the meaning crisis is going to have all 4 of those to it. And it will always, in this age, be insufficient because the kingdom has not yet come. But it will always be an estuary of the now and the not yet. And yeah, these are all very old answers.
Well, and it seems like they want to take, I I don't know. I've not been, okay. I don't know how to come up with how anything else can work other than faith
Well,
in something.
remember what I told you before? The answer to the meaning crisis for you is be a Christian
But
and figure
people,
that out.
but,
You're going to have to
but,
figure that
okay,
out.
I could say that. I could be like, hey guys, I found the answer to the meaning crisis. It's been with me all along. Be a Christian. But
There you go.
everyone on my Twitter, most would be like, no, that's superstitious and silly.
Now let me make an observation to you. Let's think of who would be the greatest preacher in the history of the world.
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, come on, Sunday school answer.
Okay, Jesus.
Yeah, there you go. Bingo,
I don't
Jesus.
know. I'm like,
read
where
the
are
Gospels.
we going? Okay.
Read the Gospels.
Okay.
Jesus is the preacher. In fact, Jesus' preaching is so good, and Tom Holland makes this point, that 4 writers writing about him managed to write things that have fascinated not only that culture at that time, but many other cultures since then over the history of the world, horizontally among cultures too. Jesus is that good of a preacher.
Okay.
But
okay.
But Jesus preached to people, and guess what?
What?
They often didn't get it. They didn't get it at all. Yeah. He annoyed them. He fascinated them. He was so annoying, in fact, they killed him. He was that good of a preacher. So you think you're going to go to Twitter and have some words to say that everyone's just going to fall all over and say, oh.
I don't think that. No, that's the thing.
Right. And so when you say, well, what's the answer? Well, live the Christian life.
Well, it's working. It's working out your own salvation. Right?
Yes. And that's right. And being a witness. I love the beginning of the book of Acts. The disciples come to Jesus after the crucifixion. Oh, after the resurrection. Oh, and then he's with them for 40 days. And they say, now will you restore the kingdom to Israel? And if I were Jesus, I'd go like this. Okay. Because they don't understand anything. And he completely sidesteps the question and actually answers the question and says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses. And if he had said, and by the way, if you had never met me and lived nice little lives in Galilee, you probably would have been okay, maybe gotten killed in 70 AD, but some of you have died of old age before then. Mm-hmm. Now, instead, by following me, you're going to go all over the world. There's going to be lots of nasty little fights. All the churches that you found will probably squabble and have lots of different sin problems. And most of you are going to die unnaturally young at the hands of others who hate you just like they hated me. There's the package. Is that what you'd like? And they say, no, but where else will we find the words of life? There's the Christian life. Sometimes I say that to people and say, why would anyone want to become a Christian? I'd say, I don't know. It's John 6. Jesus says, eat my body, drink my blood. And everybody leaves him. And he looks at the disciples and says, what about you? You going to leave me? No. Where else will we find the words of life? There's the Christian life.
And, okay. But I so many, the echoes of, and again, like, it's not bad. It's just the sort of modern day, but we've moved past that. We're enlightened now. We know science.
That's right. So that's why we have this meaning crisis. Congratulations, we've graduated to the meaning crisis.
I know. Ta-da! Yeah, I know. And it's people saying, but we have science. We're post enlightenment now. We know better.
We have science, and it brought us the internal combustion engine, and so now we're killing the world. And in fact, we know how to stop climate change, at least if you buy that whole package, which I know many of my audience doesn't, so I hear it in the comment section. But notice, now we're impotent. So now Bret Weinstein is like, we've got to do something, or we're not getting out of this. And it's like, yes, yeah. It's always been that way, Bret. What do you propose?
Something. Yeah, there's always something. It's just more global now, it seems like.
And the universal answer throughout human history has been totalitarian. Grab power, threaten people with the sword. That's how we'll fix it. Yeah, that's what.
Right, and that's why I think the idea of flipping hierarchies on their heads, you win by losing. You become a king by being a servant.
How are you going to beat a guy that every time you kill him, he raises from the dead, and he doesn't haunt you like a ghost, but he loves you like a brother? How are you going to beat a guy like that? That's why Jesus keeps winning.
Yeah, he's not going away. Like, even if people, no, and I do, because I know I can't escape my worldview, but I do try to see the minds, and I'm probably not doing the best job, but I try to see the minds of, well, because I have my own.
Doing well. I can see it. You're doing well.
Thanks. I have my own doubts because since subscribing to evolution and seeing a sort of, well, if I say believing in evolution, I always get crap for saying you don't believe
Esther
in
is going to come at you. She's going to so come at you. But anyway,
I know she already has. She already wrote me. She wrote me back when I mentioned it in the first place. She sent me a bunch of stuff. But even if it's not the literal Darwinian, I do think that there are processes over millions of that have whatever. Anyway, I don't think
agree
that the world is 6,000 years old at the very least, but I do think that there are a mix of, I do believe in ex nihilo, out of nothing creation, sort of intelligent design style, coming out of whatever. And all the people actually in this, I will give them this. I've had a number of scientist friends who are like, give me intelligent design any day over the woke crisis. So I find that quite funny, actually. But anyway, I ever since sort of subscribing to that and understanding that, because Peterson lays out the biological with the symbolic in Genesis so well. So there's a lot of overlap between what happens in Genesis that's symbolic of actually what really made us come into consciousness in our evolutionary history. And so it wasn't someone like Dawkins who made me be like, oh, evolution, okay, he says I have a mind virus, why would I believe him? It was Peterson who showed me the, I guess, compatibility. So does that make sense? Anyways, I'm starting to go into my story.
Makes perfect sense.
So I will explain this more if you ever have me on. So I don't want to go into that sort of waking up, but ever since then, I've had a bit, I guess you could kind of call it a bit of a meaning crisis myself.
I'm sure you have.
Sort of. Well, I wrote you. Do you remember? I wrote you.
Did you?
Yes, I wrote you a while ago. I was like,
I get letters from people a lot, and I can't always remember.
You probably do. So I wrote you because I saw you on Benjamin Boyce's channel.
Oh, okay.
And you were like smart and stuff, and you just seemed like not the typical Protestant preacher man. You seemed like you would be able to think outside the box. And so I wrote you questioning about...
I have a box here somewhere. Here, I have a box. I have a box.
So I wrote you questioning... All right,
let's see if I can think within the box. There we go.
Thank you. Oh, literality. Okay.
The literal internet.
So I know.
I gotta wear this from now on my videos.
No, but now you're in a box, so that's... I feel like we're kind of like...
the iron box of secularism. I have a new prop.
We're getting a little Dr. Seuss-ish. Can you think of it in a box? Can you think of it... Okay. So I actually wrote you wondering about the resurrection, I think, and the bodily resurrection. And I'm like, how...
Did I write back? I hope I wrote back.
You did. Yes, you did.
Good.
And you worded it as... Well, you know what? We live out our stories. Our stories our big stories are mimicked in our life stories. And so you said does it not make sense that if we are the bodily representation of our big stories, of our myths, that the word would not have been made flesh as well? And And that is me. That is my interpretation of what you wrote me. It wasn't actually that, but that. And it's like, for me, I'm like, oh, of course, of course, this the story was made flesh for us to understand it, to relate to it, and to see it in action, because we live out our own bodily stories. Of course, the story maker had to come. So that's where I don't know, even if people are like, whatever, Andrea, that is not clicking for me, to my secular audience, fine. But one thing we can't deny is the importance of stories to human beings. I mean, I don't know, there might be something or other. I don't think that there are other like animals or even in our primate world, they don't have stories. They don't learn the way that we learn. I think that there's something that about stories that and remembering our stories that makes us human. And
Remember, our stories don't decay.
well, we build on them.
Yes, they do. Yes, we do.
Look at the Old and the New Testament. And one thing that Peterson really points out, the sort of hypertext of the Bible, the fact that it isn't a giant mishmash, and how does it make sense with all these different authors? You know, people saying, well, here's why is the Bible true? Look at all the different people who wrote it, and how it's kind of somewhat contradictory in others, and one says it's fulfilling the other, and you don't have to keep it, but it's fulfilled, and blah, blah, blah. But it's all one story, which is kind of amazing to me. Even if you just look at it as like an interesting text, it is very interesting that it makes sense. And anyway, I do think that one thing, even if you don't believe in the things you and I are talking about, we can almost all agree. And that's sort of the starting point of the meaning crisis, is agreeing that stories are foundational. I think, you've got to find what you all agree on. So that's, for me, and especially from this conversation, I think, okay, let's agree to how important stories are, and how we need stories. And that's actually what I want to talk with this one, like the ancient Aristotle specialist guy, Stephen Klaus. I ended, actually, I think, or I can't remember if I recorded it or if it was after I stopped recording, and I asked him, I'm like, but we've always believed our stories, Stephen. Historically, we've always believed them to be true. Aristotle didn't believe those stories. Plato didn't believe the stories, but he still put them in his writings. And he said, well, Aristotle thought that the people needed them because they believed them. So I'm like, well, don't we need to believe them? And he's like, well, that's the next episode. And then we stopped, and I didn't get to go further. So that's what my question is, like, how do we need to believe our stories? How can these secular scientism people, how can they come up with stories? We have to believe they're true, right?
They have stories they believe are true, but those stories
they're not
aren't
inspired,
terribly
though.
helpful. What?
They're not very inspired. They're really boring. You mean like scientists?
And they're not battle tested, and they keep changing. And that's why they don't win.
Because science is always fluid.
Yeah, well, science is a particular way of looking at the world that is very powerful and very wonderful in many ways. But
they would call it objective. They would call it the only objective way of seeing the world.
And I call that the monarchical vision. But we don't possess that power.
Okay.
We can't look at the universe from nowhere. We always look at it from a place. And so Peterson uses the illustration of walking through a cornfield. Well, here's the thing about a cornfield. You could stand outside of a cornfield and talk forever about this species of corn that was given to us by Monsanto or whatever, but that doesn't tell you anything about how to walk through it. Okay. And that's where action is really important.
The is ought sort of.
Yeah. and
walking
and
over it.
Vervaeke's the thing he brings into this thing is really this relevance realization, which is this really cool idea. But I don't have time to go into that now. But
Okay.
you know, so yeah. So I really like John's work. It's been really helpful to me.
Well, I would like to talk to him because I do need to hear. I don't know how they're gonna do it without a faith-based something, even a religious framework. I don't. They do have a religious framework though. They don't call it that. How do you?
Yeah, and that would be very interesting to ask John that question. Maybe next time I talk to him, I'll ask him because it's just so what is religion? And the word religion is so terribly fraught, and there are actually the problem with the word religion is that there are too many competing definitions of it that are
Yeah.
all valid, but within the context of a conversation, what are we actually trying to talk about? So that's the challenge.
Does my like confusion about it make sense? Like about like well,
Oh yeah.
we have to they have to believe in the stories. Okay, what? Okay, I'm gonna end it. What I have to ask. I suppose I need to ask them this. Someone who believes in it. They wouldn't say believe, but they believe it. What are their stories? What are they? What are the stories? I guess that would maybe be Vervaeke or Bret. I don't know. What is the story? Like, oh, let's start with Newtonian physics and or do we go back to, Pythagoras or what are their stories? What are we believing in? What's the framework?
Yeah.
What does
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, yeah. And can it be something, and this is again where, the observations that Peterson made about these very old stories, these stories have been worked on and worked on and worked on and
Yeah.
compressed and
And like
compressed and
shaved
compressed,
off and added to, and the bad has been moved and the good has
and that
stayed.
they're purified over time and they become really durable, powerful things because they're very, very old and they've been battle tested by innumerable cultures. And you don't just make that thing up today. You won't know if you've actually done it, or no one can know if you've actually done it until 100 or 1,000 years from now. We're still reading Augustine. That's how huge Augustine is.
Right.
And but there are so few of those. Plato, Augustine, Aristotle, Socrates, there's so few of them.
Yeah.
Jesus, and then and
Well,
then
I
Jesus,
mean, whoever wrote the Quran, that's still here too.
that's still here too.
That's the
That's still here
thing.
too.
Like, I don't agree with those practices, but it's still here.
That's right. That's right. Just old doesn't mean right,
Right.
but it means you'd better take it seriously.
Right.
Because, and the opposite of our cultural bias, which is, oh, new is better. Might be. Let's see 500 years from now how better it is. Well, I'm not going to be here 500 years from now. Uh-huh. Oh, little center of the universe.
I have such a fuzzy, I don't know what they're, I don't know. I don't understand how they're going to do this. Because again, I'm speaking with you who we agree on the answer. Easy peasy.
Yeah,
There
right.
you go. I know it's not easy peasy though.
Because they say, and
like
both
we
Bret,
have to live it. I you mentioned
right, right.
We
But
have to
both
live
of them
it.
say it can't be lived in this time of science. That's the answer. And that answer many, many people agree with.
Okay,
And so then that's our struggle.
Can you explain that when they say that? What does that mean then?
Well, it's exactly what Bret said in that little tweet that, well, Jesus, if he's going to be a viable candidate for a moral philosophy, you're going to have to deal with, the magical element, which is
Yes.
not viable in the 21st century.
Exactly. Yes.
That's the argument. And
Yes.
it's a powerful argument. That isn't just something that's
Yes.
dismissed, even though I can at times be dismissive. But that's a powerful argument. And you and I have to wrestle with that. And that's what we're doing. And okay, what does it mean to be a Christian now? And we are not exempt from the meaning crisis. We're just as fraught by it because we
Right.
stew in those same juices.
Okay, so that's the problem also, because sometimes I don't mean to, but I slip into that sort of hubris of, well, I've got the answer, but it's not easy, and it's not. But then I slip into bits of doubt where I'm like, oh, is
And
it
you
though?
couldn't you cannot connect with people who are out there unless you have the doubt.
Okay.
The doubt is important because it forces you to wrestle with the same questions your friends and neighbors are wrestling with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you actually become helpful over time. So
Okay,
your
I'm
doubt is not your enemy.
let me grab something. Hold on. On the Discord, I've been having a lot of fun on that Discord, by the way.
I figured you would.
You're kind of like a bit of a celebrity there.
Well, that's a problem.
Oh well. Okay. Never
I'm
mind
gonna
that.
I'm gonna create a fake account so that I don't have to be a celebrity on the Discord, and I can go on and people can call me a jerk or whatever, and that'll
Okay.
be fine.
Okay. Um
I'll come as an angel unawares.
entertaining angels and
Yeah,
whatnot.
that's right. See if anyone entertains me.
Okay, so someone wrote, so okay, on the Discord that you invited me to a few days ago, um, I was talking about, hey guys, is this safe for me to express my doubts here? Will I get eaten alive? And they're like, oh no, this is the place for doubts. And someone, uh, a guy who goes by the name of Voth, who says he's an atheist, but I don't. He's not the kind of atheist I've ever met before. But he uh, he said, as an atheist, oh, in my phone, as an atheist, when I've heard believers express doubt, it makes it seem more tangible, like vulnerable and endearing in a very human way. I can respect the devotion more thoroughly because it's in spite of doubt. This is courageous, and it made me feel very good.
Good.
Anyway,
And that
I don't.
Discord is a special place filled with wonderful people.
Well,
It really
I've
is.
never had someone who didn't who was outside of my framework say that to me about faith. And I've always had people be like, "Oh, you're good. You follow that doubt because you're gonna understand that how wrong religion is. You're just, So it's very interesting to hear that. It's interesting to hear that as an idea, a way of looking at it. But and I do think that being honest about your doubts is important, because a lot of that sort of fundamentalist style, don't question, just believe, that's not helping anyone, including that person. um but yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. There is a problem. Lots of people can agree there's a problem. That everyone who I've talked to about the meaning crisis has been like, yes, there is absolutely something missing, and but we don't agree on how to solve it. And I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna be solved.
You're not God.
But
You're just a little human being
I'm
like the rest of
very
us.
curious. I want to know what I know, but I want to know what people think. I want to know, like, well, what do you think? Like,
Oh,
how?
that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I know, but I don't. It just doesn't seem. I guess, and not. There's no easy answer. Even if we do have religion as an answer, you're right. It's not like it's easy, but it is something that I don't. I don't think you can just create something that you call not a religion but functions as a religion. I don't see it. You said it before. You can't stand the test. It has to stand the test of time, right? So,
You wouldn't know if you did it within your lifetime.
right. What? Okay. I guess I'm not. You're like, talk to them. I'm not in that space. But I don't know. It just seems like you think you can do that. You by yourself? I mean, some people did. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, they all founded religions. They've been around
And
for a while.
look where they are.
I will very
Only
different. Well,
we say only one of them's alive.
well, yeah, very different
Christians
places.
are such cheaters.
I know. I guess I'm very like, yeah, I'm very like, I don't know where this ends, and it kind of sounds like you're like, you won't ever No one will know. But I do think that it's important. There are some layers that can be like for conversations like this about stories, and if we can get to the truth of, you don't have to have any faith to agree that there's something in humans that is like searching for something to bring
Right.
meaning. And I
Right.
think
That's right.
that's a good place to end. But I guess I would like people, if you don't agree with us, you can say, please be kind. But Paul, okay, are there any closing thoughts? Like, what do you think? Did this make sense, Paul?
Oh, this was a wonderful conversation. I think people are really going to enjoy it and get a lot out of it.
I feel like nothing was solved and that I don't even know if I said what I wanted to.
That's what YouTube is for. There's always another recording. There's always another shot to get it right.
I'm still left. I don't know if I know more. Like, I'm still like, I think I might have more questions now.
Well, that's fine. Then you'll have plenty of meaningful things to do for the next couple of decades.
Okay, well, I did cover, you know what? This covered the Christian perspective, which is, it's not something I've really covered on my channel before. I did touch on it with Esther, but this kind of it really fully pulls that out and teases it out.
Okay.
So I appreciate you for being that face for me, and I think I think we're done.
Okay.
We're done?
Okay.
Okay.
I think so. I think so. I think this was good.
Okay, thanks, Paul.